Call the meeting to order, December 4th, 2025. Ask everybody to silence their phones, please. This meeting is being streamed live for public to attend and recorded as a public record. The recording of this meeting will be available at www.ncwildlife.gov. I call on Commissioner Ray Clifton for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ray. Next, I call on Commissioner John Coley for our invocation.
And I would like to say I'm giving this on behalf of Commissioner Alford, who couldn't be here today. So let us pause for a moment of reflection. As we gather for this December meeting of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, we begin with gratitude. We give thanks for the natural beauty and abundant resources of our state, its forests, rivers, wetlands, mountains, and coast, and for the wildlife that depends on our care and stewardship. We offer our deep appreciation for the men and women who serve as our wildlife officers, especially during this busy hunting season. We're mindful of the risk they face each day in protecting the public, enforcing our laws, and safeguarding the lands and waters we all cherish. We are also grateful for our dedicated staff, biologists, and field teams whose knowledge and commitment sustain the health of our wildlife populations and ensure that future generations may enjoy these privileges. Their work, often quiet and unseen, strengthens our mission and enriches our state. We give thanks for the citizens of North Carolina who treasure these resources and partner with us in responsible stewardship. And as we approach the close of this year and look ahead to a new one, may we be guided by wisdom, unity, and a shared commitment to conservation. With gratitude for this season and for the opportunity to serve, we now turn to the business before us. Amen.
Amen. John.
Thank you. Next, call on Margot Minkler for a roll call.
Good morning. Going to do a roll call for commissioners present for our December 4th, 2025 meeting. Chairman Mark Craig.
Here.
Vice Chairman Landon Zimmer.
Here.
David Hoyle. John Coley.
Here.
Wes Seegers. Tommy Fonkel.
Here.
Tom Berry.
Here.
Brad Standback.
Here.
Jim Ruffin.
Here.
Ray Clifton.
Here.
Steve Wyndham.
Here.
Monty Crump.
Here.
John Stone. Hayden Rogers. John Alexander.
Here.
Tom Hayslip.
Here.
J.C. Cole.
Here.
Mike Alfred. Joe Bud.
Here.
Reed Smith.
Here.
Justin Boyd. Mr. Chairman, you have a floor.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everybody now that mandatory ethics inquiry. North Carolina General Statute 13A-15 mandates that the commission chair shall remind all commissioners of their duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts under this chapter. And the chair also inquires as to whether there is any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before the commission at this time. It is the duty of each commissioner who is aware of such personal conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest to notify the chair of the same.
I'd like to recuse from exhibit C12.
So noted.
C2, sorry, C2.
Thank you. Next, the meetings of the October 16th, 2025 meetings were distributed. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? I ask for a motion of approval of said minutes.
Moved.
Second. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. I next like to call on Executive Kyle Briggs for a special announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. We have a special guest with us today and wanted to recognize the North Carolina Wildlife Federation and their CEO, Tim Guestwicki, presenting us a check for longleaf pine restoration on the Chowan Swamp game land. Tim, if you'd like to come up.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to wish good season's greetings to all and say that the Wildlife Resource Commission remains our best partner for wildlife conservation in the state. Without question, earlier this year, we were able to give $35,000 for elk collars. We've been able to sponsor 2 lifetime youth fishing awards at the National Hunting Fishing Day and Take a Kid Fishing Day. And now we're able to support the Chowan Swamp game lands restoration. You should be proud that one of your staff, Jennifer Prince, went way under budget. And so we were able to provide, we had allocated $30,000 for this project, but she went under, so 17,000. So we got more money for another project. And probably most importantly, Thomas Bell, one of our 7 lobbyists in Manly, were up in DC last week. We are committed to getting RAWA done before Senator Tillis leaves office. So thank y'all very much, and we appreciate y'all.
Next, I'd like to call on Jason Cottle for our financial presentation.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll begin with an overview of our year-to-date activity in both our general and capital improvement funds. And I'll preface this, as I always do, by saying that the data presented is as of October 31st. As our total revenues in our general fund as of October 31, 2025 were $59,192,455.08. Excuse me. Total expenditures in the same $56,736,283.99, leaving us with a fund balance as of October 31 of $23,569,313.10. Looking at our capital improvement fund, total revenues were $7,747,934.53. Our total expenditures in the same category were $5,497,895.84, leaving us with a fund balance as of October 31 of $6,724,771.25. Excuse me. Any questions before I move to our endowment fund? As of October 31st, our endowment fund balance was at a record high of $243,683,022. The asset allocation remains, as you heard the chairman mention yesterday, around the 85-15% mark, a little closer to 86-14 here. But that tends to be the spot we've held at for the last 6 months or so. Expendable income as of this point in time was just over $99 million. After we factor out our obligations, the largest of which being the Setzer renovation, we've got a remaining expendable income balance of just over $45 million. I know it was mentioned yesterday, the wish to allocate an additional $20 million out of our equity fund into the short term. Does that require?
It does. At this time, I'd like to inform everybody that the financial committee has recommended moving an additional $20 million from equities into the STIP fund. Do I have a motion of such?
Motion.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, next we have a special presentation of Executive Director Kyle Briggs with the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to present one of the Wildlife Commission's most prestigious awards, the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award. The award is presented to someone who has made outstanding contributions to wildlife diversity in their habitats in North Carolina and considered a leader in wildlife resources conservation. Today, we are honoring the 20th Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award recipient, and that winner is Dr. William Bill O. McLarney. And he is well known for his special passion for aquatic communities as well as inspiring community stewardship. Dr. McLarney holds both a master's degree and a PhD in fisheries biology from the University of Michigan, though he would say his background is really in conservation biology, focusing on whole watersheds and landscapes, and his work in the Little Tennessee River Basin proves that statement. With him today, we have Andrea Leslie, who nominated him, and online we have his wife, Susan, attending virtually. As part of this, I'll start out reading the resolution that was adopted in honor of Dr. McLarney. Whereas Dr. William O. McLarney is a highly respected aquatic biologist who has worked tirelessly to promote the conservation of wildlife diversity in the Little Tennessee River Basin of North Carolina. And whereas Dr. McLarney founded the Little Tennessee Watershed Association and the Land Trust for the Little Tennessee, now Mainspring Conservation Trust. And whereas Dr. McLarney has led successful efforts to conserve ecologically important natural areas as public lands, including Nemours Game Lands and the U.S. Forest Service Alarka Laurel. And whereas Dr. McLarney has successfully advocated for local policies and regulations to protect water quality, riparian habitats, and floodplain conservation. And whereas Dr. McLarney initiated and led the Upper Little Tennessee River Watershed Stream Biomonitoring Program for 35 years, accumulating the largest fish-based database of its kind, an invaluable source of long-term aquatic biological data. And whereas Dr. McLarney has motivated local people and communities to be active stewards of streams and their watersheds and has inspired future leaders and conservation biologists through volunteer and intern programs. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission does hereby pay tribute to Dr. William O. McLarney for his outstanding contributions to the citizens of North Carolina through his continued commitment to the conservation of the state's wildlife diversity. And be it further resolved that the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission expresses its profound gratitude to Dr. McLarney and presents him with the Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award for his exemplary leadership in the enhancement and conservation of North Carolina's non-game wildlife resources. Dr. McLarney, if you'll come up, I'd like to present a plaque that says Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award presented to Dr. William O. McLarney in recognition of your significant contributions to the conservation and of wildlife diversity and habitats for the inspiring community stewardship of the Little Tennessee River Basin in North Carolina. Thank you so much. We also will present you with a photo by Andrew Zimmerman Photography of teaming nest chub nest, Tennessee shiners, and stone roll. And the floor is yours to say a few words.
A very few words, because I was told to my relief that I wouldn't have to make a speech. But I was also reminded during the reception downstairs of the old preacher's adage of tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them what you told them. So I'm going to do that. What I'm going to tell you is thank you to Andrea and to the commission and everybody involved. The middle part is a little longer. I specifically want to thank the commission for many, many things, not all of which directly involve me. I'm probably in this room most closely identified with Need More Game Lands, but as you know, I'm also on the staff and a founder of Mainspring Conservation Trust, and I'd like to thank the commission for your collaboration and help on the Elah Dam project, on the ongoing project in Snowbird, and many other things that I may be more peripherally involved in. So that was the middle. And the third part, what I just told you, was thank you.
This time we'll take a short break for photographs. Next up are the committee meeting reports. I'd like to first call on J.C. Cole for the Road and Safety Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Vote and Safety Committee had yesterday reviewed several permanent rulemaking items, including NF.0307 Pava, Iredell, Lincoln, and Mecklenburg counties, and F.0324 for Davidson County, and F.03838 for Caldwell County, and notice of text for NF.0305 for Brunswick County. Committee endorsed all the items which will be presented as exhibits later in this meeting. There being no further business, the committee adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, the Hinges Committee with Commissioner Brad Standback.
Habitat, Non-Game and Endangered Species Committee met on December 3rd, 2025 at 10 a.m. Rachel Hoke started the meeting by presenting the augmentation plans for the Carolina Heel Splitter Mussel in 6 Mile Creek in the Catawba River Basin, and for the Atlantic Pigtoe Mussel in the Flat River and Deep Creek of the Neuse River Basin. The committee approved both augmentation plans. Next, Rachel presented the Yellow Lamp Mussel Conservation Plan, including information about ongoing research of the species. Following discussion on the mussel's life history and management activities, the committee approved releasing the plan for a 30-day public comment period. Rachel provided an update on the ongoing Roanoke logperch reintroductions in the Upper Mayo River and the recapture of stocked fish during monitoring. Staff will continue stocking and monitoring the species for the next 5 years. Catherine Jewell wrapped up the meeting with a presentation on the results of a property owner survey focused on conservation attitudes about Roanoke log birch reintroductions and conservation benefit agreements, CBAs, in the Mayo River Basin. Highlights from the survey included over 21% of respondents had heard of Roanoke log birch, and 51% indicated an interest in learning more about CBAs, conservation benefit agreements. That concludes the report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up is the Fisheries Committee with Commissioner Monty Crump.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Fisheries Committee met on December 3rd, 2025. Jeremy McCargo discussed how restoration of striped bass in the Moose and Tar Pamlico rivers has not been successful despite a 30-year stocking effort and a harvest moratorium implemented in 2019. Corey Oakley presented temporary rulemaking to allow for a limited striped bass harvest season in those rivers. Temporary rulemaking notice of text will be considered as an item later during this meeting. David Godfrey discussed the effects of Hurricane Helene flooding to smallmouth bass populations in Yancey County. Current monitoring indicates that the Cane River population has declined significantly, while the population in the North Toe River is holding steady or possibly expanding. Captain Jewell then presented the results of the North Carolina Black Bass Angler Opinion Survey. Data indicate that black bass is the most sought after species in North Carolina by anglers, brings an economic impact estimated $2.4 billion to the state of North Carolina. Finally, Corey Oakley updated the committee on repairs at Armstrong State Fish Hatchery, renovations at Bobby Setzer Fish Hatchery, and the completed purchase in October of the Gladys Ford Fish Hatchery. With no additional topics, the meeting was adjourned. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Crump. Next up was the Migratory Birds and Waterfowl Committee, Commissioner John Coley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Migratory Birds and Waterfowl Committee met briefly yesterday, Wednesday, December 3rd, to receive updates on several topics of interest regarding migratory game birds. Game and Fur Bearer Supervisor Chris Turner updated the committee on potential changes to federal frameworks for the 2026 waterfowl seasons, including the ability to increase the bag limit on AP geese in the Northeast Hunt Unit from 1 to 2, along with likely changes to the snow goose hunting seasons next year. Next, Chief Brad Howard gave us a brief update on the Waterfowl Hunter Survey, which is currently in progress. The survey will close at the end of December, and staff will update the committee at the April meeting when presenting their final recommendations for the migratory bird seasons for next year. Finally, our new migratory game bird biologist, Fran Farley, gave us an update on the ongoing woodcock research being conducted by states in the Atlantic Flyway. North Carolina was a significant participant in the initial study and will contribute to the second phase, which will look at wintering habitat, nesting ecology, and harvest management. Having no further business, the meeting was adjourned.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up is the Wild Turkey Committee, Commissioner Steve Wyndham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first meeting of the newly established Wild Turkey Committee was called to order yesterday, December 3rd at 1:45. National Wild Turkey Federation District Biologist Cully McCurdy gave us an excellent presentation regarding wild turkeys in the Southeast from a partner's perspective. Cully discussed the Turkey Federation's new initiative called Habitat for the Hatch. This is a 10-year initiative designed to combat the turkey declines by focusing on brood and nesting habitat improvement. Cully provided a short overview of NWTF's impact in North Carolina, including the nearly $1.25 million provided directly to WRC to support the agency's management efforts in the last 5 years. It's very clear to all that the Turkey Federation is and will remain a great partner for wild turkey management in our state. Next up was our upland game bird biologist, Ms. Hannah Pumpkin. She gave a summary of the Commission's accomplishments for wild turkeys spanning the last 13 years. Hannah discussed regulatory changes as well as research accomplished in that time during the largest turkey ecology research project ever conducted in North Carolina. She then discussed where we are going with our efforts to continue to stay focused on our turkey population management. Ongoing disease research stemming from the ecology project, the adjustment of turkey seasons that would take effect this upcoming spring, and the first turkey hunter survey in over 30 years were just a few of the highlights for our upcoming turkey work. Having no further business, the committee was adjourned. Mr. Chairman, before I give up the floor, I'd like to say a special thank you to Vice Chair Joe Budd, Turkey member Tom Berry, Tommy Fondle, John Alexander, and Reed Smith. They are your new Turkey Committee. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Commissioner Wendell. Next up was the Executive Committee. The Executive Committee met yesterday, and CFO Jason Cottle and Director of Conservation Policy and Analysis Kerry Ruhlman presented an overview of license fee increases. The proposed 3.4% CPIU license fee increase was discussed, and revenue projections were provided. Discussions about trends in license sales, impacts to federal funds, and comparisons of license fees in adjacent states followed. Additionally, the committee was briefed on the potential impact of the RAINS Act, and staff was asked to keep the RAINS Act requirements in mind for future CPIU discussions. Director Briggs indicated that staff would continue to revisit the CPIU increase every 2 years, as was previously directed by the commission. Lastly, a brief discussion was held regarding the ideal asset allocation of the agency's endowment funds, and the Finance Committee was asked to develop a recommendation. There being no further business, this meeting was adjourned. Next was the Committee of the Whole. The Committee of the Whole met yesterday and began with presentations on the 2025 Thomas L. Quay Wildlife Diversity Award. The committee then reviewed the draft 2026 through 2035 NC Wildlife Resource Commission strategic plan. Next, the committee reviewed 2 notices of text related to license fees and commercial activity permitting. This was followed by discussions of 3 permanent rule lawmaking adoptions by the Paynes Branch Game Land Wildlife Service agents and fur bearer propagation. The committee also reviewed 3 property matters, including a memorial request for former staff member Clay Allen, and an easement request on Gold Rock Game Land in Hyde County, and a further easement request on Mitchell River Game Land in Surrey County. Updates on CWD as well as current deer and bear harvest estimates were shared. The committee approved a recommendation presented by Commissioner Crump on behalf of the Finance Committee to move $20 million from the Equity Investment Fund to Short-Term Investment Fund. A motion was then made to enter closed session pursuant to NC General Statute 143-31811, paragraph A, subsection 3, to consult with agency counsel regarding ongoing litigation. After returning to open session, the meeting resumed. There being no further business, the committee was adjourned. Next, I call on Brad Howard to introduce speaker for our Wildlife Spotlight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce Fallon Owens, our Extension Wildlife Biologist. She's housed in the Wildlife Management Division, but she works cooperatively with all the programs in the agency. Fallon is our main point of contact primarily for human wildlife interactions and outreach and opportunities. You can see her across television networks across the state giving interviews from time to time on different wildlife things and things that are going on. So today she's going to talk to us. One of her roles as wildlife extension biologist is she is the chair of the Beaver Management Assistance Program Board, which is a statutory established board that advises the commission on the BMAP program. And that is one of her roles. So Fallon has lots of programs and management about beavers and beaver interactions across the landscape. So she's put together a really good program to talk about beavers in North Carolina for us. So here's Fallon.
Thank you, Brad. So I put this presentation together as basically a whirlwind tour of beavers in North Carolina. Hopefully it'll be a little bit fun. And let's go into it. I'm going to start off with some history because the history of beavers in the state is actually really interesting. When the European colonists, we're going to go back in time, European colonists first arrived in the New World and they met the Native American tribes, they learned that there was this amazing animal that was essentially a main form of money for the native peoples who lived in the New World. The pelts were incredibly valuable and they were used to exchange and barter. They were literally used as money because the meat was valuable, the fur was used for clothing, and essentially the new American colonists took advantage of that and started exporting beavers to Europe, and that became a thriving economy that actually drove the speed of the settlement of the United States. Not only colonists coming into the 13 original colonies, but expanding out westward to get access to this incredibly valuable beaver resource. And you can see a picture of these hats. Beaver felt hats were all the rage in Europe at that time. And actually the popularity of these beaver felt hats almost led to the complete extinction of the North American beaver. Because at that time in the world, we didn't have conservation rules, laws, protections. Beavers were considered to be a completely unlimited resource. They were very abundant. And essentially you can see here these bundles and these old illustrations and photos. All of these are bundles of beaver pelts being shipped or bundled up to be shipped back to Europe. And people made their entire careers and their fortunes off of this beaver economy. But we learned the hard way. Beavers were one of the ways that we learned that natural resources are not necessarily unlimited. And by the end of the Civil War era in the United States, beavers had gone from being extremely abundant to extremely rare. And here in North Carolina specifically, in 1897, the very last reported beaver was harvested in our state. And that was it. We had 0 beavers in North Carolina for several decades. So zooming into the 1900s, when we learned that we had to actually protect wildlife in order to have continued availability of it, I'm just going to go through this very quickly. 1903, North Carolina got its very first wildlife protection law. Excellent. In 1927, we got funding to conserve wildlife. Very important, as you all know. Then in 1938, due to popular demand, North Carolinians demanded that basically the inchoate version of the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission, its predecessor, reintroduce beavers because the value of beavers was still alive and well, and North Carolinians wanted their beavers back. So we basically convinced Pennsylvania to give us 29 of their beavers, and we released them in the North Carolina Sandhills. Then I have to put this in here because it's very important as a reminder that in 1947, the Wildlife Resources Commission was established. We got even more resources and personnel to work on this reintroduction of beavers. And by 1953, the commission's biologists were able to confirm that there were about 1,000 beavers across 7 counties in our state. Good work, go us. And by the 1980s, and for anybody who lived through the 80s, you can confirm this is pretty much what it was like. It was a really weird time, but it was also a very exciting time for beavers because it was in the 1980s that we were able to confirm that beavers had been reestablished in all 100 counties in North Carolina. So good job, us. This is a major conservation success story. Today, our estimated beaver population is about 1 million animals. Not only did we establish beavers, but they're doing very well here. All right, I'm going to switch it up a little bit and just kind of give an overview of basic beaver biology because they're really neat critters. They are the largest rodent in North America and the second largest rodent in the entire world, only second to the greater capybara that lives in South America. Just looking at their face, they've got some neat features here. They've got orange teeth, which are pretty unique. They've got a big kind of dark nose, small beady black eyes right at the top of their head so that they can see when they're swimming, and kind of these black whiskers. And the reason why I talk about these facial features is because I have a very short quiz for you. All right, so all of these photos are on the internet labeled as beavers. They are not all beavers. So I want you to take a moment to kind of look around and guess which ones are beavers versus some of the other similar animals that we have here in North Carolina. And if you know your beavers and you paid attention, you'll know that there was only one beaver up there. That's the top middle. And again, it's kind of like almost like the bear of the rodent world. They're kind of stocky. They've got that sort of dark feature, dark nose, dark mustache, orange teeth. Let's go through the other ones really quick. If you see white whiskers on an aquatic rodent, that's going to be nutria. The larger eyes, usually not necessarily found near water, and kind of a paler version of their face, that's going to be our groundhog. And then the last one is a little bit of a trick, because if you saw this guy in person, you would definitely know it's not a beaver. They are significantly smaller, and that's the muskrat. They also have a pointier, more rat-like face. So I hope everybody got that quiz correctly. Okay, a couple other features. They have these gigantic rear feet that are about the size of a human hand. So very, very large, proportionate to their body, that are fully webbed, and they use those to swim around just like a duck does. So they paddle around with those rear feet. And most people know that they have this flat paddle-like tail that they don't use to swim, but they do use to communicate with other beavers. And I've got a small, short example of that. Little video showing basically what beavers do when you walk up to the pond or any other perceived threat. There you go. They slap the water. They have a lot of muscles toward the rear of their tail or at the base of their tail that they use to really just smack the water. And that's a warning to all the beavers in the area, basically that beaver's family. There's a threat nearby, duck and cover, get out of the way. A little bit about the industriousness of beavers. They build some really interesting, complex structures. This right here is a beaver lodge, which is very different and distinct from a beaver dam, which people are usually familiar with. The lodge itself is more like an apartment for beavers. They actually live inside this structure, and this is what it looks like on the inside. It has an underground entrance, or not underground, underwater entrance that basically prevents any predators from getting access to the inside of the lodge. And then it leads to a chamber that has air, and this is where they sleep and groom and give birth and basically live their lives without any worry about predation. So really, really neat structures that they build. And then, of course, we have the beaver dams, which most people are familiar with. And beavers build these dams basically intentionally to create more habitat for themselves. They are aquatic and they want aquatic habitat. They especially want aquatic habitat that's really close to trees because trees are their main food source. So they create these beaver ponds, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but essentially this is the main structure that has impacts for us. Let's talk a little bit about what beavers eat. There's often a misconception, and hopefully some of you at least will learn something new here. Beavers are technically called lignivores, which means that they eat wood, but they don't eat the wood that we think of as wood. So the heartwood, the sapwood, the mature sort of dead inner hard part of a tree, beavers cannot digest that. That is not what they eat. What they eat is the cambium, which is the very thin layer of green tissue right under the surface of the bark. So if you scratch a twig and you see a little bit of green, that is the cambium layer, and that is what beavers eat. So let's talk about sort of their diet. That middle photo there is essentially the remnants of beaver snacking. Just like human beings eat corn off the cob, we eat the kernels off and we throw the cob away. That's what beavers do with sticks and twigs and trunks too. They eat that cambium layer off the outside, and then they throw away the rest or use it to build a dam or lodge. So when you see something like the photo in the bottom right, where a beaver is actively chewing on a trunk, they're not consuming that. And you can actually see lots of wood chips on the ground next to the trunk because they're spitting those out. They can't digest that. What they're doing is intentionally trying to cut the tree down so they can get to the luscious foliage up above. Okay, let's talk a little bit about beaver ponds themselves. They're actually incredibly beneficial ecologically and to humans. What they do is essentially slow the water down. They block the water, mostly, to slow it so that the flow of water through a waterway is slowed down. And in that process, the water is allowed to filter out pollutants or sediment. So the end result, the water that comes out on the other side of a beaver dam, is much cleaner than the water that went into it. As part of that, because the water is slowed down, that helps reduce erosion on the stream banks. And the water is available in drought conditions. So these ponds are acting as retention ponds for water. So that water is available if, water is otherwise scarce in the environment. And also because it holds that water, it is allowed to drain and seep into the ground, which recharges our water aquifers, which is extremely important for drinking water for humans. So a lot of benefits from beaver ponds. And this might seem counterintuitive, but beaver ponds reduce flooding. So of course, the place where the pond mysteriously appears when the beaver arrives and decides to build a dam, that localized area one could definitively consider to be flooded. But downstream of that, because the water has been slowed down along the stream course, essentially is helping to reduce flash flooding downstream. So beaver ponds act like retention ponds, the same ones that human beings build specifically to help reduce flooding. So they will help reduce large-scale flooding downstream of where they actually are building their ponds. So maybe counterintuitive, but true nonetheless. And very important to everybody here in this room, beaver ponds are incredibly important as creators of excellent high-quality wildlife habitat. So many of our game species thrive around beaver ponds, from deer to especially waterfowl. One of the main reasons why our wood duck population is doing so well is because of the reintroduction of beavers in North Carolina, because those ponds provide vital habitat for our waterfowl. Also, game fish like trout benefit from beaver ponds, and a whole slew of non-game species. Songbirds are usually very abundant, and the wildlife diversity around beaver ponds is remarkable. To the extent all of these benefits basically amount to many states in the western part of the country that are actively trying to restore their beaver populations. They have not accomplished what we've done here in North Carolina. They're behind the curve, and they are basically back where we were in the 1900s, where they might have a few beavers, but they're trying to get their beavers back for all of the benefits that those ponds and dams provide. But of course, I do have to talk about the downside of beavers. And that is basically that where they build dams and those ponds appear, when they interfere with our infrastructure, that causes real legitimate problems for us, usually in the form of flooding to homes, roads, and other forms of property. Of course, historically, back when the European colonists first arrived, North Carolina and the rest of the country was mostly undeveloped, and beavers really weren't impacting anything in a negative way when they built their ponds. But today, our environment looks drastically different. We have developed our landscape in large part to benefit humans. We've created roads, agricultural crops, timber crops. All of these forms of infrastructure compete with the type of habitats that beavers provide. And that means real, honest, measurable damage for us, which can look like this. So almost all of these pictures were taken recently, I think last year, here in North Carolina. You can see a road culvert in the top left that's completely blocked by beavers. You can see homes that are threatening to be flooded, roadways that are being flooded from stopped up culverts and ditches on the side of roads. These are real issues that we cannot ignore. So what can we do? When I get contacted about beavers, a lot of times the first thing that people want to know is like, oh, I love beavers. I don't want anything to happen. Can we relocate this animal? I can't have it on my property. Can we just put it somewhere else? But for a lot of different reasons, most of which because we have an abundant beaver population and there's nowhere you can put a beaver where there's not already a beaver. They're territorial. They don't tolerate other beavers. They have homing instincts, so they don't stay where you put them, and they usually try to get back to where you originally captured them. They do carry some diseases that we are concerned about, and what happens when that beaver causes damage where you put it. So for all of those reasons, relocation of beavers is illegal in North Carolina. It is not an option. But there are other things that we can do. There's some really amazing devices that we have discovered that help basically trick beavers into not building. They're called flow devices, and they're usually a pipe and cage system that allows the water to flow through the dam. Also exclusion, basically keeping the beavers out of places where we don't want them. And then of course, harvest or other forms of lethal removal. I'll go into each just a little bit briefly. This is kind of an explanation of how a beaver deceiver works. You can see there's a pipe that is installed in the middle of the dam, and then there's usually a cage that prevents beavers from blocking up the outlet. So these are very effective devices in some situations, but they do require regular maintenance. If they are not maintained, they fail. So this is a great solution sometimes, but not always. For individual specimen trees, maybe that particular tree has a lot of value. Basically, the best way to protect individual trees is put a fence around them. Very effective, and also prevents damage from other wildlife, such as deer. Another form of non-lethal management, which is sometimes appropriate, but certainly not always, is that if a beaver pond appears in a place where that land is not necessarily being used for something that absolutely has to continue with that use. Say, for example, somebody's favorite deer hunting land, or it's a patch of woods that was next to the creek that, you know, the landowner likes to hike around in. Essentially, if there's an opportunity to reframe the use of that property and incorporate the beaver pond into the intentional use of that land, there are a lot of benefits. So basically, beaver ponds provide excellent fishing habitat, excellent waterfowl hunting habitat. For those who just want to watch wildlife, beaver ponds provide great opportunities for watching wildlife. And if you're into kayaking, basically, one of the options is to reframe the land use and incorporate beavers. And if that's possible, which is definitely not always the case, that can be one way of turning a problem into an opportunity. But of course, we also have lethal options here in North Carolina. The ideal version is regulated trapping. Beavers are still valuable. Their meat is still delicious and nutritious for humans. Their pelts can still be used to make hats and other items. And there's a burgeoning industry of making jewelry out of wild animal parts. Anyway, there's a lot of uses for beavers that exist in today's economy. And so regulated trapping is a great way to make sure that when beavers are removed, they also get used and don't go to waste. And here are some other resources for landowners specifically that are having problems with beavers. Beavers in North Carolina can be trapped or shot year-round if they're causing damage. You do not need a depredation permit to remove beavers that are causing damage. Basically, it's fair game. If you got a beaver problem, you can remove that problem by removing the beavers. For people who don't want to handle that themselves, they can contact a licensed trapper or a wildlife control agent, which we provide contacts for those individuals on our website, and people can call and get information about who's in their area who can do these services. And very unique to North Carolina, we have a whole program, the North Carolina Beaver Management Assistance Program, that provides very affordable beaver damage control services for private landowners in the state. So I'll talk a little bit about that because I am the chair of the board that runs this program. It's been going for over 30 years, and it is highly collaborative. So the Wildlife Resources Commission, participating counties, the landowners themselves, and along our roadways, the NC Department of Transportation, all contribute funding to provide these services to private landowners. And the services themselves are provided by USDA Wildlife Services. So there's a lot of organizations and groups that come together to help support and provide this program to the public. The goal of BMAP is not to get rid of beavers. We reintroduced them for a reason. We do not want to eliminate beavers in North Carolina. Moreover, the goal is to basically address beaver damage where it's occurring and allow beaver populations to stay healthy where they're not causing damage. And it's a pretty good program. Last year, for every $1 that was spent to fund BMAP, $5.30 in property were protected from damage. And here's a breakdown of what that looks like. Basically, last year, BMAP prevented $17 million in property damage. And if you look, you can see that most of that imminent damage that was prevented is on our roads and bridges and our rights of way. So that all of that is DOT funded, but also a big part of the property that was protected is timber. All right, here are the counties that are currently participating in BMAP. You can see that mostly they're in the eastern half of the state because that is our floodplain area where flooding can be more extensive just because of the topography, but BMAP is also popular in the mountainous parts of the state. And I'll leave it at that for BMAP, but real quick, because I didn't get a lot of time to talk about beavers and I could talk about them for a lot longer, just some quick takeaways. Beavers are one of Carolina's conservation success stories. We reintroduced them and they're doing great here. They provide excellent aquatic habitat for wildlife. They help clean our water and they do help reduce large-scale flooding. And the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission provides robust options, both for recreational use of beavers and for damage control. So with that, thank you. I'd love to take any questions.
Mark, I've had the pleasure of working with Fallon in the BMAP program, and I can personally validate the effectiveness of that program. And I can also validate that this lady has the same passion in the fields that she has demonstrated to you on that podium. So thank you very much, Fallon. And also say that I've never sat through an agency spotlight. It was not entertaining and informative. And I'm very appreciative that we have them at our meetings. And this one was certainly no exception. So thank you.
Thanks, Brad. I agree with what Commissioner Pommel said about how great this presentation was. I would love to see this available on our website in some form that would be easier for the public to get this kind of snapshot information.
It's already in the works.
And I read that often muskrats will cohabit with beavers in their lodges and a lower level lodge inside.
Yeah, they don't tolerate other beavers that aren't part of their immediate family, but they're a little bit tolerant of other species.
What is the average size of a beaver colony family unit?
They can be fairly large. It's interesting. They have these really tight-knit family groups where there's a male and a female that are mated together, and their young of the year will stay with them. And usually they stay for a year or two before the sort of older juvenile beavers will go off and find a territory of their own. So a colony can be, up to maybe, 24 individuals with the adults, the young from the previous year, and then the young from the current year. But it doesn't just continue to grow. Eventually the older young will distribute and go off and establish their own territory.
Just as part of that, is it true that if you trap some of the beavers that the rest will end up leaving?
If you trap the adults, the young most of the young will probably leave. But if the habitat is good, there's going to be beavers that are going to stick around to use it.
Other than being in the central part of the state, the Sand Hills, where they put out the 29 beavers, was there any other biological reason other than why they chose that area to put the 29 beavers?
It was a little bit before my time, but my guess is that they made an estimation that the habitat was good, that there was probably high demand in that local area for the reestablishment of beavers. This is totally conjecture. But I think they felt like that was going to be an area where the beavers would successfully establish and that there would be a lot of public support for that.
Generally geographic center of the state too, so that may have been a consideration too. I didn't know it. And the next thing I want to take up for the beavers here, because that picture of the combine in the beaver pond, whoever's driving that combine didn't see that beaver pond. You can't blame that on the beaver.
All right, I picked the photo for visual impact. I'll admit that.
But the other thing, and I've seen several of your interviews on television and read, and you do a great job. But the most recent one, you might want to have a few comments, if commissioners hadn't seen them, about the deer attacks that have been, you've gotten calls on that were reported to the Wildlife Commission.
Sure, we kind of had a cluster of these situations, sort of in quick succession. And this is something that happens periodically every year for the most part. Basically, as you all know, deer are wild animals, but some members of the public don't understand that. And either they like to feed and try to hand feed deer, or if they find a fawn in the spring or summer and they assume that it's abandoned, they take it in to save it. And then it grows up to be a fully adult buck. That causes really severe situations where, especially during the rut, when those bucks are full of testosterone and they become aggressive, but they also have zero fear of people, that can lead to encounters where people can get hurt. And that's what we've seen recently.
We've had several in North Carolina already this year, correct?
Yeah. And those situations are preventable. We're trying to get the word out for people not to try to treat deer like pets or tame animals, because they're not.
You did a good job conveying that.
Thank you.
How do counties that may not be participating in VMAP, what's that process like for them to enroll?
Sure. Every year we send a notice out to every single county inviting them to participate so they can opt into the program. They do pay a fee of $6,000 in order to participate, and that's to help fund the program. And so every year they can either contact us and say, nope, I'm not interested, or they can opt in. And that's every single year.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you.
All right, next we'd like to call on Ben Solomon for his property.
Good morning. Exhibit C1, we'll take these individually with your permission, Mr. Chairman. Exhibit C1 is a proposal to rename the Suggs Mill Pond Gameland Waterfowl Impoundments, the Clay Allen Waterfowl Impoundment Complex. Staff like to recommend approval of Exhibit C1.
I have a motion. So moved. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Exhibit C2 is the Gull Rock Gameland easement request. This is a request for a temporary construction easement granted to the North Carolina Coastal Federation and a permanent easement for maintenance of the infrastructure, as well as a drainage easement granted to the Fairfield Drainage District number 7. Staff would like to recommend approval of Exhibit C2.
Vote for Exhibit C2.
So moved.
Second. Second. Thank you. Any questions, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? We have one recusal. Thank you.
Exhibit C3 that is on the screen for your review today was amended based on conversations in the committee of the whole yesterday. The proposal is now for a restricted permanent access easement that would grant access to the Shores property off of River Road. And the access will be restricted to ingress and egress specific to forest management practices. Staff would like to recommend approval of Exhibit C3.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ray. Any discussion?
I'd like to thank Monty for modifying that yesterday in the meeting. I'd also like to just bring to the fore 3 years ago, 4 years ago, we might have had through property management through your committee, maybe one every 6, 9, 10 months requests for easement. It has become now almost a standard that everybody's requesting easements. In my opinion, we need to be very, very careful going forward on granting any types of easement, because you're giving up public trust lands for these easements. We're in charge of taking care of the entire state of North Carolina's property that's been granted us that we bought. Most of these people asking for easement knew we were there before. I just caution every commission member to really weigh heavy on when they're granting easements. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Noted. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, sir. Next up is Betsy Haywood on rulemaking for water safety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Today, I'd like to take the first three exhibits as a whole. These are for final adoption of rule amendments, and then we'll go to the notice of text after that. First, as discussed yesterday in the meeting of the Boating Safety Committee, staff recommends approval of Exhibit D2, which is 15A NCAC 10F.0308. This is an amendment to codify regulations into the North Carolina Administrative Code for regulations for vessel livery companies on Lake Norman. This will clarify standards for livery companies and facilitate and streamline enforcement activities to improve public safety. Next, in Exhibit E2, 10F.0324 Davidson County. This would be to enlarge the no-wake zone on High Rock Lake in the cove 50 yards north of Skipjack Marina to the south to a point 50 yards south of Raven Point Boy Scout Dock, to remove the no-wake zone in the cove on High Rock Lake at High Rock Shores Drive, to incorporate into the North Carolina Administrative Code the names and addresses of marked no-wake zones around public docks, marinas, boat service areas, boating access areas, swim areas, bridges, and trestles on High Rock Lake, Baden Lake, Tuckertown Reservoir, and Yadkin River, and to designate responsibility for implementing the placement of regulatory markers to various agencies. And finally, in this group, Exhibit F2, this is 10F.0338 Caldwell County. This is to establish a no-wake zone on Lake Hickory, shore to shore, 50 yards northeast and 50 yards southwest of the Adam W. Klutz Bridge. Also to enlarge a no-wake zone on Lake Hickory in the city of Hickory from 50 yards southwest of the US Highway 321 bridge northward past Riverwalk and Lake Hickory Pub and Marina, ending at a point 460 yards northeast of the bridge. And finally, to designate responsibility for the implementation of placement of regulatory markers to the various agencies.
Do I have a motion for adoption of Exhibit D2, E2, and F2?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you. And finally, we have in Exhibit G, this is a request for 15A NCAC 10F.0305 Brunswick County. As discussed yesterday, staff received an application and certified resolution from Brunswick County requesting the rulemaking process for a no-wake zone in the Intracoastal Waterway at the G.V. Barbie Bridge, otherwise known as the Oak Island Bridge, 50 yards west and 50 yards east of the bridge near American Marine Construction. This rule is necessary to mitigate multiple hazards to boater safety in the area. Private entities will be responsible for implementation of the markers to place in the waters of the ICW at no expense to the state or to the county, so no fiscal note is required on this. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in Wilmington District was consulted, and they concurred with rulemaking only 50 yards east and 50 yards west of that bridge.
Do I have a motion for adoption of Exhibit G? Second. Right. Any discussion? Mr. Wyndham?
Betsy, is there anything we can do? You and I chatted about it yesterday. Is there anything we can do to try to enlarge that 50 yards each way on that bridge, puts you right in the middle of all the traffic both ways. Is there anything we can do to perhaps go back to the Corps and ask them if they would consider 75 yards or 100 yards each way, especially in view of the fact that the marine company is willing to pay for everything?
Absolutely. I think that is a possibility. I just know that when I consulted with them initially, they said no, but I did some research after talking with you, and there are other examples along the ICW where it's larger on one side of the bridge than on the other. And a former person that we dealt with at the Corps of Engineers spoke up about one, I believe it was at Ocean Isle Beach, and he said, I highly recommend it being a little bit longer where those large fenders stick out.
Yes.
Because as you think about it, as the boats are approaching, there's hardly any time to slow down before they get to that fender.
Correct.
So I think there is a possibility. Can we talk about that maybe later?
Commissioner Williams, I would suggest we adopt what's in front of us today and then try to readdress it and see if we can enlarge it.
Good with that, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to call on Corey Oakley for some temporary rulemaking text, permanent rulemaking text, permanent rulemaking adopt.
I think I'm just doing temporary rule, but.
Okay. Thank you. You're right. Will does the others.
As discussed in the, good morning, everybody. As discussed in the Fisheries Committee yesterday and approved by the Fisheries Committee, we bring before you Exhibit H. This is a proposed temporary rule to striped bass. This will open a season from April 1st to April 30th in the inland waters of the Tar-Pamlico River and its tributaries upstream of a line shore to shore from Gum Point and Fort Point, and in the Neuse River and its tributaries upstream of a line shore to shore between Cooper Point and Fisher Landing Point. There will be a proposed daily creel limit for striped bass and their hybrids and it will be one fish in aggregate. And a slot limit is proposed where the minimum size limit is 18 inches and no fish may be possessed between 22 and 27 inches in length. I will remind you that the joint fishing rule would be, the season would be opened by proclamation. This rule already stands in joint fishing waters.
Do I have a motion for Exhibit H? So moved. Got a second? Second. Thank you, Monty. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll call on Will Casola for the permanent rulemaking text and the permanent rulemaking adopt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I have 5 rulemaking items for the commission this morning. With your permission, I'd like to present the first 2 and then present the last 3 as a group. First item is notice of text for permanent amendments to 10A 1601 license fees, Exhibit I1 in your package. Also, we have a fiscal note for this, which is Exhibit I2. As discussed yesterday, the proposed amendments increase the fee for all licenses and permits issued by the commission by the total increase in the consumer price index rounded up to the next whole dollar. Similar to this first exhibit, we have, there we go. The second item is notice of text for permanent amendments to 15A NCAC 10H 1801 commercial activity permitting Exhibit J in your package. As discussed yesterday, the proposed amendments increase the fee for our commercial activity permits by the consumer price index rounded up to the nearest whole dollar. They also adjust record keeping requirements for those who hold commercial activity permits.
Thank you. Do I have a motion for Exhibit I1, I2, and J?
So
Do I have a second? Second. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
The third item I have is the adoption of 15A NCAC 10D 0295 Paynes Branch Game Land in Forsyth and Stokes County, Exhibit K1 and K2 in your package. As discussed yesterday, the rule will establish Paynes Branch Game Land, set deer season regulations, and prohibit horseback riding and target shooting. The fourth item is the readoption of 10G 0400 Wildlife Service Agents with substantive changes, Exhibit L1 and L2 in your package. As discussed yesterday, the amendments update rule language for improved clarity and conciseness. They update the terms and conditions for wildlife service agents. And it is important to note that these rules are required to be readopted by the end of this year. And lastly, the fifth item are permanent amendments or the adoption of permanent amendments to 15A NCAC 10H 1100 fur bearer propagation rules. This is Exhibit 1, M1 and M2 in your package. As discussed yesterday, the amendments update rule language for improved clarity, update caging requirements based on industry standards, update biosecurity and human safety standards. They clarify reporting requirements and set requirements for those working with rabies vector species. Staff recommend adoption.
I have a motion for exhibit K2, L2, and M2.
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Jeff. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Vote. Thank you, Will. Next, I'd like to call on Christian Waters to present the North Carolina Strategic Wildlife Resources Division Plan for 2026 to 2035.
Good morning, Commissioner. Exhibit N is the revised strategic plan. It includes the mission, vision, purpose, as well as 5 goals and associated strategies. It was presented yesterday in the Committee of the Whole. Staff recommends adoption of the strategic plan for 2026 through 2035 as presented in Exhibit N.
I have a motion to accept Exhibit N.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Kristen. Next, the comments by the chair. As usual, I'd like to give thanks to staff for all their hard work behind the scenes. I'd like to thank Portsmouth for keeping our people and our resources safe. I'd like to offer special thanks to the Hinges Committee. The 10-year plan is not a trivial piece of work. It provides a blueprint for all that we do, and it also ensures our federal funding match. So thank you all for the hard work on that project. Again, would like to express to everybody, this is hunting season, so it's the best time of year. Take a youth, teach somebody how to get out there in the woods, share some of your skills, share some of your land. And with that, happy holidays for everybody. Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I want to echo the happy holidays to everyone. I hope everybody has a chance to spend time with family and friends. And I really want to say it's been a really quick year. It's been probably the fastest year in my 31-year career. I really appreciate all the commissioners' advice and guidance over the last year, and I can't say enough on our staff. We have such a tremendous staff across. So everybody has a safe holiday. Thank you.
Any other business? If not, we're adjourned until next year.